Hello and welcome. This is the 8th episode of the Bits vs. Bytes podcast. I am your host, Aman Grigic, and today I have a very special guest from TWTG. His name is Kiran, and he's marketing lead at TWTG.
I have to say, we're named TWTG.
Yeah.
TWTG is our former name.
It's your former name?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
It was too Dutch.
Yeah, I get that, yeah. So it was two-tone loosely translated.
Yeah, loosely translated, yeah. Which is a made-up word, of course.
Yeah.
Because eentonig in Dutch means boring or whatever.
Yeah.
And tweetonig means everything that's not boring, that's what we do.
Exactly. So TWTG, it's a little bit... easier also to spell for people outside
the way
of
to
the
go.
Yeah. So I would like to start off because we talked a little bit in the past. We've talked a few months ago, and while we were discussing to do a podcast, I kind of saw that you have a big interest for tech as well.
Mm-hmm.
Your function or your position in TWTG is marketing lead, but I saw a big passion for technology as well. Where does that come from? How did you get so into tech?
Well, I'm not sure though. I do remember though that when I was 6-7 years old,
mm-hmm.
I went to the Media Markt, which is a local electronics store in the Netherlands. I told my mom I want to work here. This is my dream job, because they have a lot of electronics.
As a salesman?
Yeah, and I did work there.
Actually.
When I was 16, I was hired, and I worked there for I think 6 years. And I'm not a developer. I'm not a engineer or whatsoever. But I do love the field of technology. I do love everything with a wall socket plug on the end. I think that's interesting, and I always had that. So when I worked at MediaMarkt, it was a combination of somewhat tech and being more commercial, being a salesman, etc.,
mm-hmm.
which was really good for my personal development. I do say to a lot of students now, please take a sales job because I think you can learn a lot from that. But that technology part was always there because I always liked tech products, like a lot of consumer products. And when I was finishing up my studies, when I finished my bachelor, I came across John, which is our CTO at
mm-hmm.
TWTG, and he actually introduced me into the world of business to business, or like real tech. Let's say real tech might be a little bit of an exaggeration, but more a bit of like what can technology do in company processes, and what because you grow up and you see that the world is bigger than just your laptop or your phone. And I was fascinated by it, but I always had this interest in what technology does in the social paradigm. So how do people change? And I think we as this generation saw one of the biggest changes in sociology of the last decade or the last 100 years or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
We saw people turn into smartphone monsters, right?
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Yeah.
So I think that's one of the biggest changes in how we interact with technology of our time, because going to a place to work, which is a computer practically, is not much different than going to a machine and sew a trousers or whatever. But having a device in your pocket 24/7, instant connected, etc., that does a lot. And now we're even seeing other forms, which are smartwatches or maybe even implantable solutions. And I thought when I was studying, this is 5 years ago, I thought it was really interesting to see this development, and then that's why I was sucked into the world of technology, and I always thought it was interesting. So that's how
that's how you got into it. Yeah,
but asking what is true technology, you can say, I understand so much, a little bit, and the guys that work at TWTG, our true engineers and our developers, they know way more.
Yeah, they go really in depth, of course.
Yeah, and which is super interesting to be surrounded by those types of guys, and we have the same goal. We make stuff, and we'll talk about it later. But we make stuff, but in the end, we all have our own role inside of that process.
Yeah.
So understanding the technology for me is actually really important to do my commercial tasks really good.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense for you to talk about something in a marketing sense or actually telling what you do if you don't understand what's actually happening, right?
Yeah. And I call it understanding it, but if an engineer is listening now, they were probably thinking he knows nothing. And I have to agree with them. So
really small portion of what we do.
I get the tip of the iceberg. I hope I get the tip of the iceberg. Yeah.
It's for you. It's making it more understandable for people what actually happens, right? It's more.
You can call me a translator or whatever.
It does make sense. So. What do you guys do? So what's the main focus of TWTG?
Well, our most profound hashtag is the Internet of Things, which when I say that, everybody says, "Oh yeah, of course IoT."
Yeah,
I know IoT, but actually, a lot of people when they think about IoT, they think about your connected fridge, your thermostat, your whatever. Your smartphone could even be an IoT device if you look at it. But what we do is we do industrial Internet of Things.
Okay.
So what we do, we make a lot of products. Especially retrofit products. So we go to a big industry. They have like this. They have this architecture laying there already under the ground. Like let's say pipes, for example. They don't know if the pipes are opened or closed, and they can't replace all the pipes because it will cost billions.
Yeah.
So they're like, can you make a solution for us that is that can sense if it's open or closed, and then use the modern connectivity technology, like that makes the connected part of the Internet of Things, to send it to our backend so we know what's happening.
Okay.
And actually, what we do, like if we let the technology go for a little bit, actually we do two things: we save you money or we make you money. That's actually that's the main goal. So if technology works for you, then we did a good job. So that I would say that's the most pragmatic approach of saying what we do.
Yeah. And looking at a really easy example of that. So you were talking about those pipes. Do I see it like, okay, we have all this infrastructure, we want to kind of monitor it and see what's going on? Do I see it like that, or is it even more than that?
Well, it starts with that.
Yeah.
So it starts with monitoring, like is the pipe open or is it closed? Is it still flowing when it's water, for example? But you can even, if you have a lot of pipes connected and you know when they break, if you sense those, if you have sensors on the pipes that have broke in the past, then you can predict if they can break in the future.
Yeah.
So, and that's interesting because if you look at that part what I started with, like what does sociology does, or how does people interact with technology? Like we used to be, like our society currently is actually based upon something is broken. We see the water flowing from the pipe, so it is true. Please fix it. Like that's the way of a lot of companies work. Like you can generalize it to other fields as well. Like if you have a car, if it stops driving, then you go to
it's wrong.
you know you have to fix it, right? But what if your business model evolves thanks to our technology, because we make that technology, because we are not somewhat we don't do the business model for you. That's your business model. But we make actually only the tech. So, but what if you have the pipes and you have a probability rate that this pipe is most likely going to break down in 2 months? Please fix it. So we have to depend on a green light or a red light, which is technology saying to us yes or no, and we have to actually completely trust that technology to do our jobs, which is from a risk perspective. What if the technology is wrong? Then I'm replacing pipes that doesn't have to be replaced.
Yeah, if it's a false positive or whatever.
But if they're right, it can save me a lot of money because we don't have to fix
everything.
Because if a water pipe breaks, then you can imagine like there's a lot of water flowing everywhere. Or a gas pipe is even more interesting because gas is really expensive.
Yeah.
So if a gas pipe and it's explosive, of course. But if a gas pipe breaks and it goes a lot of gas out of it, there are literally tens of thousands of euros every second pumping out of the system.
Yeah.
So then it's really interesting to know not if it's broken, but when it's going to break as well.
Exactly.
Because the risk is bigger than the potential cost of replacing a pipe. Yeah,
and so when a client wants to when they want to become a client at TWTG, what kind of process can they expect? So what happens from the initial phase of, okay, I am interested in building this and this? to actually getting the product?
Well, we're an evolving company, so there's no one size fits all answer here.
Yeah.
We are now actually trying to to add focus to what the stuff that we do, because we can do a lot of stuff, but that's also how do you say that? It's a risk for your company.
Yeah.
Like doing too many stuff and being a bit. We have a Dutch thing. It's called manusje van alles.
Yeah. So
which is an everything guy, right?
Yeah.
And we are trying to fixate on several markets that we think those are the markets that make sense for us and make sense business-wise, and also we can make a lot of impact with our technology there. So we are actually focusing on utilities now. On smart cities is also part of what we do.
Okay.
But more importantly, I would say asset management, so a lot of in logistics. And we see a lot of industrial, what I told you, like with the pipes, but a lot of industry 4.0 cases.
Yeah.
So for us, the first question today would be, do you fit those boxes? Not like, because that's those are the boxes that we are specialized in.
Yeah, where you're focusing on, yeah.
And the second question would be, what is your goal? Because we can make you a proof of concept and we can do a lot of stuff, but what is your end game? Like, is it just making something so you can show your innovation lead? Look at me! I did something cool. I built this with the guys from TWTG, and that's it. Because for us, we have a limited amount of talent in house. It's hard to get more talent, and they have a limited amount of time, so we have to make decisions there. But let's say you fit all the boxes that we think, that's because that's the luxury position we're in. Let's say we think this is a really interesting idea, and we think this is commercially an interesting client, because we're also still a commercial company, of course.
Yeah.
Then we would always start with research. Research is the key of everything we do, because like yelling stuff and saying we can do this, we can do that is really easy. But if you do that, then like in two months' time, people say, okay, do it, and you don't have the research to back it up, then you're
gone.
Then it's really hard, because it's not we're not deciding on small things. Like it always seems so like when I talk about it, I always have the idea that like it may sound really easy what we do, but it's actually really really in-depth hard stuff that we do. And I think that like doing good research, like do a feasibility study, like what is your situation? Is there the possibility to get even a connection there? It could be what if you're 500 meters below sea level?
Yeah.
Like, and we have to make connected hardware. It's a big challenge to get connection there.
Yeah.
There are solutions though, but we should
you need to know the whole situation. You don't you cannot go off the bat on something like that.
And then even after that because we do that research, we take that really seriously. We can always see everything in the future, but doing that really helps us to assess which kind of timeline there is needed, which type of disciplines are needed, and then we can start working on the client case or not.
Yeah. So after that initial research phase, say the client is all good with it, and you actually start working on it. So what steps do they go through after that?
Well, I could be an anti-marketer now, because it could be that there is already a really fine solution.
Yeah, it could be.
Which is fine. Yeah. Like, we're not going to invent the wheel 3 times every week.
Yeah, just to make money. It doesn't make sense.
No, it doesn't make sense. So then it would be, okay, you have this, and this. And if we make it costs you more or less, or what, like, then it's a commercial question.
Yeah.
But like going into the phase, then of course we make a proof of concept, we do a pilot, and we're pivoting the technology, we're changing it. And it depends on which case, because it really gets really technical from this point. Like, it depends on which case we are. Yeah. But we also have like already tailor-made solutions laying on our desk.
Yeah,
I'll tell you about that a little bit more in a couple of minutes. But what we see, like, for example, like what I thought was a really interesting case, like John, our CTO, again, he told that in another interview. That's what. So I'm just quoting him because he knows. But there was like what I thought was really interesting was there is like this craft, like a really old craft, that people can listen to a motor engine, like a motor engine which is from an elevator or a truck or whatever, or a machine, and they put they put a screwdriver on top of it, and they put it on their bone next to their ear, because then they feel the vibrations of the machine. And there are a certain amount of people in the Netherlands that can listen to a motor and can expect if they are going to fail or not, or what's wrong.
That's crazy.
Yeah. But you can imagine how many people there are that can do that. And young people don't get trained to do so. It's really hard for them.
Yeah, it's a lot of experience probably as well.
It's like an old craft. Like just if you want to have something that can yield you a sword. Yeah, it's also they're there, but they're not at every street corner, right?
Yeah.
So if we look at that guy, how can we add technology to replace him? Because there are so many motors and there are so many engines and so little of those people.
Yeah, it's probably a dying art as well.
It's a dying art, and there are way more motors. So most of the time, what we do today is okay. You buy an engine. You're a factory. You buy an engine, and the factory of the company that sells you the engine says this machine can run for 10,000 hours.
Yeah.
And of course, it can run for 20,000 because they have to really be they actually want you to. They want to be on a sweet spot in what they can promise. Because if they promise you 15,000 hours and it breaks after 14,999,
you're going to complain.
You're not going to complain, but they have to fix it, so it's really expensive.
Yeah.
So they want to save margin that they are sure that they are at least the least amount of probability that they're going to be asked for service. But at the other end, they want to be as commercial more, because if the competitor says I can do 15 and you can only do 10, then you have a big disadvantage. So it's actually it's their marketing form. But what if we can make a machine that can, or we can make a device on top of that machine that can sense if the same way, like what data point do we need to sense if it's going to break down? So most of the times we start with like 20 or maybe 30 different types of sensors. And we know that in the end product, there will not be 30 sensors on top of that. Yeah. So we're looking, and that's where the part of analyzing the data comes in, is what can we take from the data, like which sensors are really relevant to put on a device. That could be one sensor, it could be two, it could be three, and what is commercially interesting to put on this device and then put on this engine. Okay. And how can and is that generalizable? Is that for every engine, or isn't it? So, and that's interesting. So, for example, like for elevators, for example, you could do like a really low level tech, because just sensing the resistance of the ropes on top of it, for example. I'm not saying that this is the case, but for example, that could be the method of testing. Well, but most of the time when people think what we do, it's like really high tech, build-in monitoring software, sensor, everything, which could be awesome, right? But you're not retrofitting a elevator, for example, with all sensors on all possible variables.
You don't need it.
They don't need it, and it's really hard, and it's almost impossible. So what our struggle is, and what our research is, and what we love to do, is finding that one key data point, that variable that defines the problem that we want to solve.
Exactly. Okay.
So, and that's if you look at IoT from that standpoint, then you understand that what I meant. Like it's somewhat different than a thermostat or a
exactly,
or a connected doorbell or whatever, which are also really cool, by the way. But anyhow.
Yeah, because we talked a little bit about before we started the podcast as well. Those clients that you don't have a lot of clients at every given time, right?
Well, we don't have a lot of small. What we try to do is only work on clients that have a big ambition, just like us. Yeah. So we want to work with clients that want to look past the first year, but also look through to the next coming 10 years. Because building a solution, a technological solution like we do, you can't make that in 2 months. No. So it's a process of years of development, iterating, improving, expanding. And then, like, for example, if you look at train tracks, then you could start by adding a connected module that senses if the screen is working. But if you start with that module, then you have a gateway as well, because you have a connected device in there, which has power, etc. But what if you then add the trash cans if they are filled? What if then you add a sensor to the floor if it's frozen or it's slippery when it freezes? Yeah. What if you then add a meter that senses how many people are there? What if you can sense if there is a potential threat, for example, on the train? Well, and I can go on and on and on with possible things you can do. And the interesting part is researching which are the interesting things to add. And that's a combination of technology and business case. Because if a trash can is being emptied every day and they are always half empty, then you don't need a sensor, of course, because you're not solving any problem. Yeah. But what if people are throwing their garbage on the train tracks because the thing is constantly filled up and it's always different? And then we can make a more on-demand business model for the trash can empty guys. Yeah. Then it's an interesting case. And like finding those those problems and solving them. That's what lit up my eyes. And I think that are the true interesting stuff when I can come back to saying then we save money, or then we make money, and then we and of course, like saying it saves money, it's really, a lot of people think it's harsh. It's a little bit a Dutch way of being really 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 concrete. But let's add it. That's, if I put it more in an American way, we deliver value.
That's the way to deliver it in the American way.
So but like think about it however you like, but I think that's when you truly do solve, if you're truly solving problems with technology, then then it makes sense. And if you're not solving any problems, then the question that arises with me is that, why are we doing this? Because marketing is not only saying you have to buy this. No, you have to understand your client and have to understand their demands. And if you can fill that in, then you're a good marketer. Like, for example, one of the best examples I would say is Starbucks. People don't want boring coffee anymore. They want those crazy stuff. So they make up what is called pumpkin spice latte. My girlfriend goes nuts. And she goes to Starbucks. But and next to it, there's an Italian shop that makes better coffee, but only sells you cappuccino. So that understanding that the client wants that crazy drink is the way of being a good marketer, and not and then you have to also discussion about make a good cup of coffee, because if your coffee isn't good, then people whatever. But like the coffee the anecdotal example of coffee is always really interesting, because the problem Starbucks solves is not making coffee, is like being there for people when they need it the most, when your flight is delayed. They're always on train tracks and whatever. So it's the light at the end of the tunnel in which you think, oh my god, I have to take the train again. But there's still a Starbucks there that can brighten up your mood, and that's why they're that expensive, because you're in a horrible situation and then you're like, oh, okay, so I'm fine. That's what like, let's pay it. I'm not. I don't say that's the only reason why Starbucks exists, but that's one of that's how I look at Starbucks as a marketer's perspective.
I get that.
But that's a sidetrack.
Well, it's a good example. It's a good example of what the difference between, you can have a good product, but you can also deliver extra. And I think that's cool, because when we look at what you guys do in the end product, actually, so. We've talked about it a little bit. So you create the hardware and also the software, right? For the
firmware, which is the base level of making them work.
And looking at that, so the firmware, what's different in making that in regards to, say, for example, I have a website, I create software, or I create an application. Is there a different? Do you approach that differently as well? Because we've talked about the hardware a little bit. It's harder to retrofit something, right?
Well, if you look at programming firmware, is also our guys are because we have a luxury position. Our hardware team is sitting across the software team. Like literally, if you walk into our office, you see them sitting right and left.
I've been there. It's true.
So the interesting part is that those guys constantly work together. And that also counts for the people that do the mechanical stuff, like making enclosures and stuff. And the interesting part there is that then you can adjust the product accordingly to the disciplines that are in-house. That's why we can do what we do. But if you look at asking why it's different, it's another way of programming, because I thought it was called embedded software.
Okay.
Because you're writing software on top of the hardware without the. If I say this correctly, please don't kill me if I don't. If a colleague listens to me, because you're writing code on top of the hardware directly, and not with some sort of language in between. Or a platform in between, or an OS, whatever. So you're directly programming on the device, which is another craft. Like building websites is different.
Of course.
I wouldn't say it's harder. I think it's different.
It's different.
And I think
it's totally different.
And from a marketer's perspective, there's a big, even bigger scarcity of those people when looked at web development, for example.
Of course,
so if we look at what we do, like if you're making an IoT solution, then the real question is there: what can you do in this big puzzle of what is called IoT? Like you can look at IoT like a sandwich or a hamburger. Like you have people that make the buns, which are I would say that's the business model or the enabler. That most of the times it's a big company that has a big problem and has a lot of innovation budget to fix that. Because like from a lot of perspectives, like startups always are the people that bring change. But like IoT is really expensive first you have to develop it, you have to research it, then you have to make it, you have to pay a lot of money because it's not 10 units and not 100, it might be 100,000 or even more units. So you have you need a big financial buffer to start, even start out.
Yeah.
So we see that normally the speedboats have to go past the oil tanker, but now we have to see the oil tanker that goes past the speedboat, right? Because like IoT, you can't say if you're a startup that you can do a small portion of the problem, but you can't say let's roll out because you don't have which problem are you solving. Like,
you don't have the skill as well.
You have to be the problem owner to so you could have somewhat of a skill, but anyhow that would say the buns. Like of course we are the meat because we are the most interesting part. But you could say like if you look at you also have IoT platforms, you have connectivity, you have data analysis on the stuff that we are hired to do data acquisition. So we are providing a lot of like we can call big data for another big fancy hashtag. But we provide data to the data analysis firms.
Okay.
And they were like, okay, if you can provide me a good data with reliable date stamps, etc., then I'm happy. So that's our job. But in this big sandwich that you are making, the hamburger that the client wants to eat, the data analysis is at least as important. And the connectivity part is also important because we can do everything really good. But if the connectivity fails, you don't have the data.
Yeah, it's just a small cog in the wheel, right?
Yeah, and the wheel, I will say the A team. So you have a lot of disciplines within the big team, but together we can solve this big problem. And that's interesting because if you see in IoT, nobody can do everything in their own, right? So so you need to work closely together with a lot of companies and a lot of disciplines to be able to provide a solution and work it out.
Yeah.
So that's what makes building products within the realm of connected hardware. It makes it different than making a Barbie doll, for example. It's a horrible example, but I can't think of something else.
That's that. Yeah, but it is true. It's a totally different craft from what, for example, what we are doing at Tevreden is creating an application that people can do a survey. That has also a lot of layers and a lot of cogs as well. But if something goes wrong, I could just push an update and that's it.
Yeah,
I think that's different in your case, right?
Yeah, we can't. Yeah, if we make a big mistake and we have let's say 200,000 units out there,
and you have a bug, for example,
and we have a hardware fault.
Yeah,
then fixing 200,000 units is really expensive.
Yeah,
because it's not only fixing them; it's also getting them back, stopping the
they're not in one place.
They're not in one place. Where are they actually? Like because a lot of products that we make, like for example, one of the cases that we did for the logistics is active asset tracking on roll cages. Well, the fancy part of roll cages, they move.
Yeah.
So if you have to fix a particular unit, you have to know where they are. That's the core of the product. But if it doesn't work, then you have a problem. But I think the interesting part is like we test. That's why you do tests, right? So you can never have one. You could never have a 100% product.
No.
But you should have a product that is tested really, really, really good. Like the last 10% of testing is so important. And I think that what the stuff that we have a new CEO, like I thought it was Christmas almost a year ago now. And the first thing that he really, really pushed on in the company was like, okay, now if you're making a proof of concept, it has to work in the pitch. But after that, it's a proof of concept.
Yeah.
But if you're making industrial if you're solving industrial problems with hardware, then you really have to be sure that your hardware is really reliable.
Yeah.
So testing, adjusting it, making it better. So that's that makes the products are way more complex when you have to roll out 200,000 units.
Yeah.
And I always and from the point you see that, then I think it's so incredibly profound with what Apple does. Like they make a product, which is the iPhone. They can make, I think they make 100 million of them every month or something.
Like 100 or 200 million even.
That's incredible.
It's incredible.
That's. I don't think that people's like we when we assess an iPhone, we say, oh, the screen is nice, or it looks nice, or it's this year they only provided 3 more colors, or it's not that more of an interesting deal. But it's so incredibly interesting on seeing how a company does the manufacturing of so many devices.
Yeah. It's not only Apple. It's actually also, for example, if I look at the other companies like Samsung, which do even more products because they don't just do the phone or the computer or whatever. I think that's fascinating because
that's really hard.
Yeah,
it's not that easy.
No, of course not. I mean, you also see that they have to have an enormous skill to get everything right, of course, and also people are. You have like the new battery gate thing. So with the iPhone, so when you plug it in, it doesn't.
I saw
charge.
that. Yeah.
So the thing is that people are complaining about that. They're like, okay, how can it be that something like this happens? But you forget the scale that they are at, so they do. I'm for sure that they have like whole departments of QA, right? So they want to test and see if everything is correct, but still things like this can slip through the
I always think that like that's what allows me to sleep at night, and even Apple makes mistakes. It's true, but if you look at the what is a true mistake that Apple did in their iPhone, I would say the bend gate was one of them. Like was the same guy, by the way, that found this error as well. What's interesting is it's the unboxing therapy. So, but I think it's really interesting that you can make products like in the 100s or maybe billions of products, and you can't name more than 5 examples that went wrong with those.
No.
There are probably good things that go wrong with those. Like I'm not saying that Apple is the holy grail or whatever. No, I'm just saying that I respect their way of making products that are really reliable and
and that just work, right? I mean that's
and that same goes in what you said. It also goes for Samsung, which is the same accomplishment, though. I would say like Apple makes one product like so many times.
And are there any other things that you do other than IoT? Is there other realms that you're also in, or is that the main focus of what you guys do?
No, we like I told you like in the beginning that we do a hashtag which is IoT, but actually we're making electronics.
Yeah.
And all our electronics are connected to the internet, so IoT. Yeah. But if we do something else, no, we are a technology company. We don't have any. Of course we are asked. We do our feasibility studies. Is something that could be something different, but in the end, if you come in our office, you only see people working on products. And on solutions.
And you have an option that some technology can come along and be more, or can also be interesting because it enhances your IoT experience, right? What are some things that you see that can happen in the future in that sense? So what do you think that next step will be in that connectivity part or in the IoT sphere?
I think it's a chain. Like you should look at it as a chain. Like if you can make one of the biggest problems with technology in general is like battery power, for example. So if you can make the connectivity way more efficient, so your product goes a long way, well, then you're a winner. Like then you can fix the chain because you can. But we also do energy harvesting, for example, which is actually exactly it's the same as your solar panel on your roof. Like it takes energy from the sky, like from the sun. We make products that harvest energy from their surroundings as well. Like we have light energy as a technology that we made, which is a module that you can place under your desk and then can power the sensor that you never need batteries again. Which is interesting because then you solve the chain. Then you can say, okay, well, technically, this was the most, like there's a computer. What's the part that breaks down first? It used to be your hard disk. Like we fixed the hard disk problem in our device, which was the batteries, was the battery power, the power consumption. So if we can now say, okay, this product can last you for 30 years, for example. Which, if you look at a business case, like what I said, the pipes are being laid under the ground for 30 years. If we can provide a guarantee that we make a product that works for 30 years, for example, not saying that this light energy works for pipes because of course it's underground, but but for example, if you can make that case, then you're I think that's a disruptor. That's a true disruption. And I see the same with 4G or 5G connectivity. Like if you can make a form of connectivity that is way cheaper and is way better and
energy efficient,
but also better in penetration in buildings, etc. And then you can be more reliable. That's also really important.
Yeah.
But those are all
iterations.
It's the hamburger that we told about.
Yeah.
Like we already have a really fancy hamburger. Only like we're changing the beef to Wagyu beef, for example, or we're using better tomatoes. Those are they all seem like incremental changes, but in the end you have a way better hamburger. And when we have a way better hamburger, then there's more value to it, right? I think that's the way of looking at because like looking at like it's always more fun to say what are the big disruptions in the market, right?
Yeah.
And I could tell you now it's augmented reality.
Yeah.
I just saw a demo that if somebody had this big industrial plant filled up with our sensors, you put on AR goggles, and if you look at the pipes, then you see the data literally projected on the pipe that's there.
Sick. Yeah.
That's really sick, but you don't have. Why would you need that? There are thousands of pipes.
Yeah.
You just want a push notification, like pipe number ABC number 12.
Yeah, has a
problem. Go there.
Yeah.
Like, and that's the part that we coming back to what I said, that it's the part of the yellow or the green or the red light that tells you what to do. And I think that there are a lot of things that are happening within the realm of technology, which is IoT, which is AR, VR. And I think a lot of stuff is happening. I think artificial intelligence, like if that's really interesting, if our devices, the data that comes from our devices can be combined, which is also privacy stuff, by the way, but if you can combine data sets and we have better artificial intelligence or better data models that can get even more insight from our products, that would be a disruption for us. Because then we made something that can do, like, for example, what if your watch gets an update and you can call with your watch, for example, without replacing it.
Yeah, that's it.
It's you can add extra functionality on a device. It's really hard to understand because actually the devices that we make aren't that smart at all. Because you should look at it. It's an ear. They only listen to sound, or they only listen like the screwdriver to the engine. But what if you can get more insight from the same data? Or what if you have two of those dumb, like just saying with annotation marks. If you have two dumb devices and you combine them and have a smart algorithm on top of it, then they're really valuable. And sometimes we see stuff that we think about it and we're like, we never expected to find those results. It's actually a scientific way of looking at it. Like, it's not our case, but there was a company a couple of months ago. I'm not sure which company it was, but they were in The Hague. They were monitoring the sound of a construction site because it was in the city center. So you can imagine that, like, if they go on top, because if they exceed the limit they are eligible for a lawsuit. And there were a lot of so you have to be. But then you can say, okay, if you're on top of the sound levels, then you get a fine or whatever. But you can also say, okay, please mind that you are now reaching the levels of the threshold that you said you can be within 10 and 100 decibels, for example. But what the sensor was constantly measuring everything, and there were data analytics, etc. And from this point, they saw in the data there was a discrepancy somewhere in the data on a certain time period. And then they were they didn't get it. So they went to the city center and go to the sensor. Is it broken? No, it's not broken. And then he looked behind him and there was a tram. But there was one tram with a square wheel. The square wheel was never, because the wheels get squared, they are not as efficient. Yeah. But this device actually recognized the square wheel in a sound discrepancy. And they told the Haagse Trammaatschappij, the tram agency, like, hey, by the tram that always goes through the street on these times, aka you know which one it is, has a square wheel. And they were amazed, like, what this for them. This is really disruptive, because then they can do their maintenance on their trams, without having to rely on the driver that thinks, I'm just driving, I don't care.
But it could also be the driver doesn't just notice it,
or doesn't notice it. It's also an option, which I thought was really interesting. Like you can find, because if you look from a commercial perspective, like having those insights and being able to straighten out your operation that good, then like there is a point that with your operation is that good that you have strategic advantage as well. And I think that's really interesting.
Okay. And looking at because what if we go back to what you are doing and also what you feel what's the thing that you're particularly proud of since you've started working at TWTG? This is also always a question I ask at a little bit at the end, just to get a feel of what's the thing that you're most proud of?
I would say the light energy project.
Okay, cool.
Because like you can make products, you can say to people, "Oh, you want this, this, and this." Okay, we make that, but you can also take a leap of faith. And we TWTG like if we invest in this technology, then we can solve a problem that everybody is having, but nobody sees that it's having. So we think that this like the energy problem is a big one. And we see also that there's a lot of new technologies, like from the chain, from the connectivity is coming, that they're being more efficient. But what if you have like devices that are really efficient? They know everything there is to know about, you know everything there is to know about connectivity, etc. You can make a product that lasts on the battery for 10 years, for example. Then you actually made a product that is so efficient that, if it can run for 10 years on a battery, why can't it run on an energy harvesting source like light energy? And that's the moment when light energy was developed. And I thought it was really interesting also for our company that we got a lot of international press for it. I thought that was, it's like the cherry on the cake, right? So it's also, people see what we do, and
it's not the thing that you were pursuing, right? It was
we were pursuing to solve the pain that everybody has in IoT, like lower the maintenance cost by a big factor, because you don't have to replace the modules in the field. Because it's not only replacing the battery, right? Because a battery costs you X, which can be like high endurance batteries are like 10-15 euros, which is a big amount, because if you replace it 3 years in 10 years time, then it's a lot of because
if you have a lot of units,
because you don't want to replace them when they're already lowered up, because you don't want there to be a black spot in your system. So actually you're replacing them before they run out, so it's not really efficient. You have to send people there, they have to take a car, which also is not really it's costly, but it's also not really like we are also talking about duurzaamheid, the
endurance or the
local part of the environmental part of your business model. Well, if we solve a problem like that, like we have to solve that. We had to solve that a couple of years ago, because if we didn't do that, then we're now 2 years ago we're still testing around with prototypes and proof of concepts. But today we are actually, by the same clients, they are asking us, okay, you pursued us, you persuaded us, you are right. Build 200,000 of them. So if we didn't do that 2 years ago, then we would be making 200,000 units, for example, of a product with batteries, which doesn't have to have batteries, because we took the decision 2 years ago. I think that's the part, that's what I think is what I'm most proud of, that we are in a company that is not only fixated on, okay, the client asks A, we deliver B, and that's why we make money. No, we also think about stuff like solving problems that client doesn't even know they are having in the future.
So you're working at something that the client doesn't even know that they had that problem. It's a little bit like the smartphones and stuff like that. People didn't know they have a problem with how their smartphone is working at the moment.
Henry Ford said, if I asked people what type of transportation they needed, they wanted a faster horse, but I built the car, right? So,
exactly.
But that's I think like a lot of people start a company and they're like, we are the guys that you need, right? That's always because that's why we. But I truly believe that if you're really that guy, then you have a certain vision that can. Then you have this. This doesn't come. This should come to you naturally.
Yeah, exactly.
And if it doesn't come to you naturally, you might not be the perfect guy for the job. And I think I'm really proud of the fact that in TWTG we have people that see this, these types of movements, and they anticipate on it as well. And the company takes risk in taking them as well.
Very cool, very cool. I like to wrap it up with that. How can people find you? So have a shameless plug moment.
TWTG.io.
Cool.
So
it's really easy. Does it have an English version?
It's an English website.
Okay, it's an English website.
Yeah.
Cool. You also have an own podcast. If you want, you can plug that as well.
Yeah, it's Dutch though.
It's Dutch.
It's more of a hobby project of mine.
Cool.
It's called the Wereld van Morgen podcast, which is translated the world of tomorrow. Actually, Lorenzo, a friend of mine, and I talk about a lot of stuff that we see happening in both consumer as business-to-business technology. But we are now doing that together with a professor from Nijrode.
Okay.
Which is also interesting, because then you talk about stuff like for me, it's just expanding my own universe, and trying to learn from other people.
Yeah, that's the thing that I'm trying to get from this podcast as well, is to get people like you on that can really talk about what they are doing and their passion. And I would like to thank you for coming.
Yeah, no problem.
And for the listeners, you can find the Bits vs. Bytes podcast on bitsvsbytes.com. Also, we have Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn. It's all Bits vs. Bytes. And I would like to thank you for listening, and until next time.